Now that we've created our first repository on GitHub, we need to prepare our local system before we can proceed. We fire up our git bash shell. By default, it should put us in our user's home folder. This can be confirmed by typing pwd. It is a good idea to organize all projects together within one folder inside the home folder. So we create a new directory by typing in make directory projects, that's mkdir, and pressing enter. Then we can change into that directory using the change directory or the ch command. Now if we do pwd again, we can see that we are under our projects folder inside the user's home folder. We need to configure Git so that it recognizes our name and email address. We can do that by using the following command: git config -global user.name and git config -global user.email. We can ask Git to confirm the information that we just entered using the list command. Git responds by providing the correct entries entered earlier. After properly setting up our local system, we return to the new repository GitHub page within the browser. The next step is to get a copy of the repository to our local system. This is termed as repository cloning. The clone or download options are available on the right side of the project page. We can click on the copy button to copy the HTTP URL for the repository to the system clipboard. On returning back to the git bash, we can type in git clone and paste in the URL followed by an enter. As a result, Git will go out to GitHub and make a full copy of the repository on GitHub to our local system. In this process, Git will automatically create a folder based on our repository's name. We can confirm this by typing ls. This lists out the contents of the current folder. We can now navigate inside the local copy of the repository by typing in cd se-github-demo. Now if we ls, we can see that we have our README file that was created when we initialized our repository on GitHub. Now if we ask Git about the status of the repository via git status, it informs us that we are on the master branch. This is the default branch by convention for a Git repository. It also tells us that the master is up to date with origin/master, which refers to the master branch on the GitHub version of the repository. The git command automatically sets up this pointer, which is a relationship with the repository back on GitHub, and names that as origin. Finally, Git tells us that the working directory is clean. The working directory is where we do all the work and Git monitors for changes. We use the git status command to see if there are any changes between the local and remote repositories. Now that we have a repository on our local system, let's try adding a new file. For performing this task, I'm going to fire up the Windows Explorer. Examine the title bar on my Git bash, which enumerates the current working directory path. We type in the path name into the Explorer address bar. The Explorer dutifully displays the repository folder with our default README file. Now let us create a new text file called test.txt and edit the contents using our favorite text editor to say testing the software engineering test GitHub demo. Now we can see the file is in our working directory via ls. We can use the cat command to display and verify the contents of that file. Now let's take Git's opinion of this file. Git status and press enter. Git responds by saying that we have an untracked file. An untracked file is a file in our working directory that hasn't been added to Git yet. At this point, let us revisit how distributed version control systems actually manage repository changes. When we create a new file locally, the file resides in what we call the working directory. This is the folder on your system that holds all the project application files. We need to specifically tell Git about the files we want it to manage within this directory. We inform Git about the new file by using the add command. Git add start.txt. Now we can check the status. Git tells us that there is a new file in the staging area, which Git describes as changes to be committed. Now our file moves to a portion of our local Git called the staging area, awaiting a commit. You can think of the staging area as a holding area, queuing up the changes for the next commit. We haven't committed anything to the repository yet, and so we can still back out so that it will not impact the Git history in any way. The staging area is designed to allow you to build up several related changes so they can be committed as a single atomic unit. Now let's move forward and commit the new file into the repository. Git commit -m adding the test file. The -m stands for message. Now if we do a git status, Git tells us that we are back in a clean working directory state and our master branch is ahead of origin/master by one commit. What that means is that the new file has been moved from the staging area into the local repository. This is a hidden folder on your system called .git. This manages the Git commit history, that is all the changes that are finalized and are a permanent part of the Git repository. Since there are no other pending changes, once the commit happens, Git marks the working directory as clean. The commit is still a local command, which means that our file is still not on GitHub. To prove this, we return to our browser. If we refresh or reload our browser on the repository main page, we should notice no new changes. We just have the single README file on GitHub. Therefore, the last step we need to do is a push. We return to the terminal and type git push origin master. This push command specifies the remote name, which is origin, which was set up for us automatically when we cloned the repository from GitHub, and the name of the branch to push, which is master, since it is the only branch we have. Since we are making changes to our repository on GitHub, the push command will prompt us for our GitHub credentials. Once the push command returns, our new file should now be on the GitHub copy of our repository. We can verify that by returning to our browser and refreshing the page again. Now we should see our test.txt file listed. If I click on the file name, I should see the contents of that file as well.